It is day 122 of 365 days of remembering, and I am going to take you on my walk with me so we can have a little walk and talk. Trina right here. And what I want to talk about today is something really relevant to me and really cool, a new discovery I made, but also that has a deep relevance to the situation that we have going on in the world, to I think pretty much each and every one of us. And it is the topic of shifting paradigms. And yeah, in the last video, which I will post up there, I talked about embodying a paradigm, a way of seeing the world, a way of living and breathing that is our natural state of being, that is, the paradigm of source, so to speak. The framework of I'm a being of love and light, I'm an energy being, I'm energy first and foremost. I am backed by my inner being as the bridge to source, so I'm backed by all that is. I am not a body, I am a soul having a journey here to not only remember who I am, but to then, from that conscious place of remembering, to activate the remembering in so many other beings on this planet, to literally up-level the consciousness on a planet. And guess what? That's also why you came. And so what would it be like if we all operated in that paradigm? That was a bit of the subject matter of my last video. And in this one, I want to put it all into context. So I decided to do this video series sometime in December, very late December, had a sudden nudge to do it. And I've followed through with it because over the course of my life, I have noticed that being a spiritually conscious being means that I am constantly moving. I'm constantly shifting. I'm constantly evolving. It's a never-ending becoming, unfolding, so to speak. And I really think it's true, as Abraham Hicks says, that you never do get it done because there's just more and more and more. And Bentino Massaro even says, even when you think you're done, you just come back. There is so many levels to it that we just can't possibly understand. Refinement, discernment, more refinement, so that it really is what our soul craves and what our soul wants. And so since I somehow, and you, have come into this recognition of awakening and played with concepts like I want to be in alignment, I want to feel the flow of my full being. And in the last video, we established that that is our natural state. We don't need to go in and out. There is no going in and out. It's all it simply is remember, holding the cork down. If you haven't seen that video, check it out. Instead of letting the cork float, because it naturally wants to float. So stop doing the thing you've been doing that's been keeping you from experiencing yourself as a source being, from which we can then move ourselves to a paradigm that embodiment is easy. But back to the current, situation. Even the current situation of my experience, I have had a deep realization that part of my theme is connected and related to this. And what that looks like for me is that I have felt this kind of pull, and if I could put my other hand up, but I'm holding my selfie stick, I would pull both hands sort of in opposite directions. I've had this inner pull inside of me, and I didn't always quite know what it was. But recently, I figured it out, at least for now, because there's never any 100% conclusions. But this is what it feels like, that I came here to embody that truth, that what does it look like to be a source being in a body, having an experience, knowing it's abundant, knowing it's unlimited, knowing that nothing outside of it can touch it, knowing that even death doesn't take it away because it is an immortal essence, soul, spirit, space, whatever you want to call it, and connected. Like on this experience, we didn't come here alone. We came here connected to the fullness of all it is, to source energy, to the universe, because we decided to don this body so that we could navigate our experience in a completely different way, in a 3D environment with reflections coming back to us, with things that seem tangible to, in essence, play our experience out loud in front of us, and to then fine tune and discern our way into the vibration that leads to the easiest journey, but not the easiest in the way you think, the most flowing journey, the most effortless journey, but the journey that is willing to go where we ever need to go, to be taken to whatever we need to be taken, not only for our own sake, but for the sake of the whole collective as we raise that consciousness. So part of my theme is to have this bumping up of if I embody that paradigm in the midst of the counter paradigm, and let's just face it, it's not as far counter as it could be, but it seems pretty counter to who we are. I have often sort of jokingly said, but it seems like true, that the reason we stand in the place we stand in this paradigm with the systems that we have and the things that are happening is because it was created by default from forgetting. It was created by default from the space of thinking, 100% being identified with the body, the character, the person, the belief that I live in this body that's made of blood and bones and tissue and is vulnerable, and that other things are out to get me, and there's things outside of me all the time that are going to hurt me, and so I have to be always on the guard, and also that I can't trust other people, and basically that my security and my safety is constantly at risk. And from those spaces, even though it probably isn't quite to that level, anywhere near that level for most of us these days, even with what's going on in the world, there's still that residue that's there. And that is what we created most of the systems. Not to mention that then we got really hung up on this whole money power thing as a substitute for the true alignment that is ours. We thought that if we just manifested a bunch of stuff or a bunch of experiences or had a pile of money, like somehow those things were going to fill the gaping sort of hole that was in ourselves, the gaping yearning that was just constantly calling us for more and more and more. And at some point, if we allow it, we will come to realize that none of those experiences, none of those things, none of that stuff can ever fill it, because they're peak experiences and they're not, we can't find outside of ourselves what can only be truly found, connected to, and lived by inside of ourselves. So that establishes where the other paradigm came from. And some people call it the matrix. It's been referred to as the dream, the delusion. And what's interesting is it's almost like that pull thing that I was talking about that I experience inside of me is also part of this created reality. Interesting, isn't it? It seems like that pull of duality, the duality of forgetting juxtaposed against remembering, and choosing to step into remembering. Now, what's really interesting is right at this particular point, we are favoring, listen to that beautiful bird. I don't know if you can hear it, but it's beautiful. We are favoring, in some ways within the paradigm, the forgetting that with everything that's happening with the coronavirus and with this call to come home to ourselves, which is how I'm reframing the call to be home. It's really a being home with ourselves. We have been neglecting that, and so now we are being in some ways forced, and I believe by all of our own participation in this creation, to help enhance the awakening of the world. Why else would we find ourselves in a situation where people, especially elderly people, but people at all, are being put ahead of money? That just doesn't seem, that's not part of that paradigm. So something is breaking apart, something is shifting so that a new paradigm can be born, a paradigm that is more, becoming more in alignment with who we truly are, with our natural state of well-being, with source, with love, with light, with coming together for the unique expansion of every being on this planet on a soul level, and honoring and seeing that as what our greatest work is, our greatest experience that we could have. Not money, not more stuff, not cell phones, not video games, not TV shows, not Netflix, not relationships, not how other people reflect me, not building a business, not getting $1 million or $10,000 a month or just enough. Like, none of that. That is not why we came. And we've allowed that distraction that was miscreated to pull us and take us. And so now, some of us, like me, I feel, have been aware in a deep way and almost here to play out the shifting of that paradigm within ourselves so that it can then be shifted in the world at large. And this has been something that I just came to realize and like snapped. It just, like, every single piece of my life fell into this place of deep understanding of why I felt this constant sort of resistance and tension within myself, and to also own and accept that it isn't mine. Like, this is a felt thing. This is a collective creation that we all bought into. We all bought into the forgetting long enough to create this current reality, which is, just to be clear, only an illusion, which is just that reflection being reflected back to us over and over and over again. And so I know that within me, part of the piece of the puzzle that I am to the awakening of this planet is to navigate and to embody that new side of the paradigm. Because what has happened throughout my life experience is that every turn, every corner, every turn, every experience has taken me back to that pull, that counter pull that exists of like wanting to fully embody one thing that feels so true, so pure, so like, oh, so resonant, so like through the every aspect of my entire beingness, like from the tips of my fingers to every cell in my body getting lit up, to the whole field of energy, and just feeling myself dissolving into that energy when I sink into that truth. And then that being juxtaposed against the matrix version of its paradigm and how it views the same thing and how they bang into each other. And I felt that constant resistance my whole life, realized that it was my choice, but also it was being bumped up against a bunch of different beliefs. Like, what will happen if I'm the only one? Or what will happen if no one else gets me and understands why I've chosen a paradigm that seems so strange? Or what if no one else can hold it? I mean, not that that's true, but you know, these are the thoughts that your mind brings to it. And of course your mind's going to bring those things, because the new paradigm doesn't leave as much room for the ego, if at all, or it is a transformed, transfigured version of the ego. So I will just briefly mention a few of these so that you have a reference point. Parenting is one of them. So from before I even had children, I was determined to parent in a different way. I was determined to be as empty as possible, and to raise my children as an awakening part of my own journey, and to see myself as awakening them, as being pivotal in that process for them, to see them as if they were tiny small flowers, beautiful buds that were going to open in front of me. Hence why I had 4 of them, to amplify my own experience and to co-create in that experience with them. And feeling this sort of naturalness about all of that, like we naturally learn. And from that place I stepped into homeschooling and had a lot of beliefs about sort of unschooling, even like letting kids come to their own understandings, to their own knowings, and teaching them all kinds of different things about like energy and beingness. And at the time I was young, and when I first started, and hadn't really established any of those things in myself, so there was a pull for me to embody the truth, which was a felt thing, but not enough confidence, not enough experience, not enough like embodiment on my part to really be able to do that. And I feel, and so I sort of caved, so to speak, or was swayed and gave in to the predominant belief about parenting. So the idea that there's reward and punishment, that you give kids time out, that you're always trying to control their behavior, that you're always trying to come sort of at them from a perspective of like, well, I've lived longer than you, and so I know better, so you should do what I told you. And that they have to be taught, instead of letting them unfold into their remembering, into their knowing. I would just do it so much differently now. But I didn't feel free over the last 23 years that I was parenting. I didn't feel free from my own choice to fully embrace that paradigm. And now I'm standing in a place of having this sort of mixed up vibe that has been my children's experience. And for the most part, it's worked okay. And it's obviously perfectly the way it was, because they had to live through what they lived through to become who they were born to be. And yet now that I stand in this new place, fully intent on being as embodied as I can in myself, and then calling forth that embodiment in them. So that's one example. Another example is when my husband passed away, transitioned from a physical body into floating as a soul. It'll be 10 years this August. I again felt this pull of like, the way that I felt and called to this experience, the way that I wanted to meet it was like joyous. It was like exuberance. It was like this incredible experience of like freedom. But then capped by this experience from the rest of the culture of how we view death, of how we view grief, of how we view this processing of this deep emotion. And so I did okay with it, but still, again, less so, but still to somewhat allowed myself to be pulled back into the other paradigm of how to do things, even though it goes counter, just like the parenting model, to everything that I believe is true about who I am, and about what the truth is, and about the basis of how we came here to have this experience. That experience of his transition so suddenly, so profoundly at such a pivotal time in my life. Leaving me 39 years old with 4 kids under the age of 13 was like tremendous catalyst, tremendous opportunity for growth. And yes, in many ways I met it, but in a whole lot of other ways I allowed myself to seek distraction and love outside of myself to counter the imbalance that had happened. Whereas if I had just trusted what was clear in my own knowing, I could have just let it go and processed it. And that's what I have done since over the past 10 years. But yet again, it was an experience of wanting to embody a new paradigm of how we grieve, of how we experience the transitioning of someone from simply a physical body to free as a soul. Another example. Another one is business. So I have felt this call to serve, this call to share the way I do in these YouTube videos, but on bigger levels. And that I really did come here to be an example, to share some of what I've learned, less as a teacher and more as an embodier and as a holding a space for other people to embody, which is why I've been calling myself an intuitive energy midwife. And it's some words that I made up, but basically includes the 3 things, which are presence and being like really seen and held, having this space that holds you no matter what's going on and sees you through the eyes of source and just allows that transformational process to come through you so that you can let go of this identification that you've held as a person to move into this embodiment of being source, or of being a being that's at least connected to source, for lack of a better way to say it, because it's a process. And I know with myself, I don't, it's not like something you're just going to flip like that for most people. It is more of a process and a journey to decide that that is what you want and to be all in. So to have a space that where you're like, that's it. It's like when you are giving birth, when the labor process happens, there's no going back. You can't pause it. You can't stop it. It becomes this wild energy that is moving through you that in some ways looks like it has a life of its own. And when we decide to birth our own highest being, when we birth our full self into this experience, shifting the paradigm and moving, that's exactly what happens. It has a momentum and it takes on a life of its own and it becomes a process. And most people won't allow themselves to have this because it feels unsafe, because it's unknown, because we lost our sort of imprint or encrypted knowingness of this experience, and that's the space that I want to hold for people. Then there is just the processing of it, just that I feel like I can systematically pull together different pieces of what different beings on this planet have brought forth as ways to connect more deeply with yourself, of ways to process stuff that needs to be processed, of ways to frame it, and pulling all of that together. And then through my intuitiveness as an empath, to be able to read into what is being called for with someone and which one of those processes will work best, so that we design your own sort of soul map of how you're going to navigate this experience of birthing into your full self. So anyway, that seems big, and that seems like I finally sort of came into what it is that I want to do. And then when I step into this idea of sharing it and having an online business, or how do I get that message out there, yet again, paradigms bumping. So I just want to share it. I just want to build it and they'll come. And I just want to know that that's true. I want to believe that I'm attuned to source, that I'm attuned to my inner being, that this is all for the awakening of myself and everybody else, which is all just other aspects of myself in some way or another, because we're all reflecting each other. We're all in this together. And to trust that and to just tell the truth and be transparent and be authentic and say, you know what, I had these experiences that have demonstrated something to me. I live in a certain space and I know that I'm good at holding that space, that I'm good at those types of, sessions that will help you dive deeper into this. But ultimately, all the work is yours. I'm just willing to be your partner, to be your guide, to be your midwife, to intuitively attune with you and hold the highest, most vibrational source energy space while you navigate this little journey on your own, this piece of this puzzle. Not a little journey, it's a big, powerful, major shift. And so I just want to put that out there, and then I bump up against this idea that online business, again, another one of those things co-opted by the Matrix, where you got to build a landing page and you got to tell people what's going wrong in their life so that you can tell them how you're going to fix what's going right. And yet I don't want to fix anything. There's nothing to be fixed because there's nothing that's broken. This is just a natural part of the journey that I'm inviting people into, because I know it's why I'm here. I know it's what I was born to do. And so I want to assist in that. And I have to find my way to do it in a way that feels true and authentic And that's all I want to do. I just want to tell the truth and say, like, I want to hold the space for you. If this feels right to you and you're ready, it'll be much easier if you have someone to do it. And then we bump into the whole thing of the paradigm of asking for money, which is just the way we do it. I mean, it really is. It's going to go away. I already know it's going to morph and change multiple times before we probably just completely let go of it. But for now, it is still the way we exchange energy for the most part. I'm certainly open to other ways of exchanging energy. And when someone gives their full time, their full presence, their full beingness to something, we often map that to money. So again, another paradigm I'm bumping up against, but I stand in this place with all of those things, with how much, even relationship, that's the last one I want to mention, relationship. So the way we have viewed relationship, even though as spiritual beings, we want to imagine that relationship has shifted to a new place, still so much of the world, specifically the matrix world, the forgotten world, the forgetting world, those that are still sleeping, they look for relationships to fill themselves. They look for relationships to complete themselves. They do believe that someone's going to make them happy. And they believe that the behavior that the person that is their partner, their husband, their wife, is supposed to be in alignment with what's going to make them happy. That's part of the negotiation that they make, is having a relationship. So 5 years ago, when I had stepped away from one relationship, I came to this understanding that I want to live an unconditional life, and that it's possible to live an unconditional love-based relationship where the only reason I'm having a relationship is to experience what I see as my relationship with my inner being played out loud with another human, so that I can feel that constant reflection and the deep work that we can do together when we're not worrying about being triggered as much with each other. We're not worried about the outside world impacting us. We're centered in ourselves, but we're taking the bumps and working with them, not yelling at each other, not dispersing that energy outward, but really pulling it inward and going, what is this showing me about myself? How can I use this to empty more, to surrender more, to develop myself more, to connect more deeply with myself? And that really, when we joined an aligned partnership and I said those promises, the top promise for me was I love myself first and foremost. And from that place, I choose to flow my love to you. So everything I need is coming from me. I have a self-sourcing relationship, and I invited him to have a self-sourcing relationship too. So we're free, like we're both free. Such a different way to do a relationship. Also bumps up against the paradigm. For whatever reason, this was a paradigm that I was willing to bump up and push. Not push, but bump up and just be, like just decide that this was it. And part of it was, I think there's a big reaching in the collective to have a new way to do a relationship. So the resistance was a little bit different. I mean, I know part of me is telling other people that they have to do it that way. Whereas some of the other things that I was talking about seem to be. And the couple other ones I'll add is like health, which is a really relevant one right now. I think that health has nothing to do with germs. I don't even know if they're real. Viruses, I don't even know if they're real. I mean, everything's an illusion, so ultimately they're not. But ultimately, it comes down to resistance in our bodies. Our bodies are these amazing, beautiful beings that are almost like as if they're covered in mirrors and constantly reflecting ourselves back to us, back to us, back to us, from the inside out, from the outside in, every which way. So when we hold resistance in our own beingness, it plays out in our bodies. That's just how that goes. So all disease, dis-ease, all offness, all pains and aches and all those kind of things is that. So if you want to be healthy, then decide that you're going to be healthy. Live a life that's healthy in the sense that don't do things that go against what you believe, because you also live your beliefs. You don't eat food, you eat your beliefs. So if you believe the food's bad, don't eat the food, because if you think it's going to make you fat, it is. If you think it's going to make you feel bad, it will. You can't get around that. That's part of the law of attraction, which is the manager of vibration on this planet. But also stand in, again, if you lived in the paradigm of source, what would the source paradigm say about your body? It would say your body's in tuned, it's innately healthy, it's vital, it knows how to right itself, it's like a mini ecosystem all on its own, and it doesn't matter what comes to it, given the time and space and the love and the process and the not being resistant to what is happening, to just allowing it. Everything will keep writing itself and writing itself and writing itself, to the point that if we're still going to choose to leave our bodies so that we could come back as new bodies and have different experiences as souls, that will just become an easy thing. Not so much resistance, not so much stress and strain for us or the other beings around us. So all of those ways are ways that I have seen that I am being called to embody this new paradigm. I bet that you and many of you, or many of your friends, or many of your soul friends, are also being called to embody that, because as we step into the embodiment of it, it will become the reality that we are all being called to. So I don't know exactly all the details of how I'm going to do that, but that's what I'm moving with and that's what I'm doing. And if this resonates for you and it feels like something that you also are being called to, please like my video, please comment. I'd love to get some conversation going. I have a Facebook group on, hey, I have a Facebook group called Conscious Creators. I will put the link in the description so that you could join there and we could really get some conversation going about what it means to embody the new paradigm. This is the time. There is no doubt we were all being called to this pause so that we can contemplate the forgetting paradigm and move more into the remembering paradigm. That's it. I'm all in. So I would love to see all those others that want to be all in with this too. And I will talk to you soon.